Nearer and nearer came the visiting stars, the Etherian ships from thousands of worlds, with countless millions of emancipated souls, dwellers in the Nirvanian regions of Wak'hah. And when they reached the boundaries of the Earth's vortex, they halted a while, to form in ranks, so that their glory would add to one another. While they thus stood in the great vault of heaven, a gateway opened amid the stars on one side, and from far beyond came a strange and mottled sun, swaying to and fro. And this was the great fields and forests of Wak'hah, letting loose the billions of the delivered earth. God Neph and his hosts saw it, the strange and mottled sun. And every soul burst forth one universal shout of applause. For it was coming straight to Horde. And as it came nearer, the curtains, sails and streamers, made of yellow, blue and red fire, began to wave and surge, like a ship in a rough sea, but steadily holding course in the undulating elements. Presently guardian ships could be seen, thousands and thousands, traveling beside the laboring sun, the hosts of Wak'hah. And the guardian ships were themselves like stars, and carried millions of Etherian souls who had been gods and goddesses on many worlds, and they formed wings for the Wak'hah avalanche, to hold steady the course to the red star, the earth of mortals. And thus, in honored discipline, came the fleet of Wak'ah's worshippers, who, only 200 years before, were like vermin delving into darkness, deep buried in death, as their only knowledge, and to whom, great Wak'hah and his exalted worlds were unknown. Brighter and brighter grew that great waving sun, sailed by the immortal gods, growing larger and more imposing, till, when it entered the earth's vortex, it became like living fire, large as the earth, and of brilliant colors from black to adamant, which is shiny clear like a diamond, with blue, white, purple, yellow, scarlet, pink, of all shades, and living, and sparkling, with the broad curtains suspended, deep as the breadth of the world, and with sails and flags that reached upward, high as the moon. Midway in the vortex of the earth, it, the foreign, waving sun, stopped, and the multitude of stars beyond, now gathered in, majestically, from every side, till nearly throughout the fabric of the earth's atmosphere, there was not a place that did not glow with Wak'ah's fire of heaven. Music, which rose from the throne of God a little while before, now ceased, for here was the play of elements in harmony, which is the same as music to the ear of mortals. The kaleidoscope of splendors hardly stood still, but kept moving, changing and forming by the decrees of the gods and goddesses, as a general on earth manipulates his armies, in the evolution of arms, which is to say, in a set of disciplined and orderly movement in the field by military units, so in majesty and splendor, the marshalling stars constantly evolved new and glorious changes, stretching across the whole firmament of heaven. And now another gateway opened amid the stars, and a cluster star was seen approaching from the southeast. It was like a star surrounded by stars, and brighter than all the others. This was the starship of Af, the Orion chief, at the sight of which, all souls in the firmament turned in pride and wonder. In the play and management of worlds, he, Af, had attained to be swift and mighty, above all the countless millions of gods and goddesses assembled. And at the sight of his Etherian star, angels and gods whispered, Af. And the magic of his name, widely known in the Nirvanian fields of the emancipated heavens, spread abroad, till every soul uttered, Af, in all the regions of atmosphere and on the earth. Nearer and nearer he, Af, came, nor did he stop at Shinvid, the boundary of the earth's vortex, but steadily, and with power, sailed on till his star stood in the doorway of heaven, and here halted as if to complete the immortal scene. But a moment more, and all the avalanche of the glorious worlds around, moved onward toward the earth, surrounding it on every side, and with the star of Af making headway for the throne of God Neph in Horde. This was the morning of the third day in the tide of Dan, in which there were still 4 days left. But now the marshals took their parts. First, Sueji, chief over all the rest, cried out from the throne of God Nef, "All hail, O Af, son of Jehavah." And the words were caught up on every side, and uttered in one breath around the world. All the while, the great starships and son of Hachuan gathered in, nearer and nearer, till, like a net, they joined and filled the earth's atmosphere in the east and west and north and south, and below and above, on every side. And the words of Sueji the marshal, "All hail, O Af, son of Jehavah," traveled like an echo over all the heavens. Then Af's fleet drew near. He and his hosts alighted, and he ascended the throne, saluting, saying, "All hail, O Nef, God of heaven and earth." And this was also uttered by the millions of hosts. After which, the signs and ceremonies of the gods were briefly concluded, and a recreation of 3 days proclaimed. So the angel hosts came forth out of their ships, or by the endless chain sped to any quarter of the earth they desired to visit. And for 3 days and nights the visitors dwelt on the earth, and in the lower atmosphere, inspecting how the earth was made, its land and water, its mountains and valleys, its beasts of prey and beasts of burden, its birds and fishes, and, above all, its mortal people and spirits who lingered about the earth, the great storytellers, who knew no higher heaven. Then the visitors surveyed atmosphere and the works of God and his lords, including their nurseries, hospitals, factories, schools, and colleges. On the 4th day the marshals called order, and so great was the discipline of the hosts and the arrangement of the starships, that in a moment of time, order reigned among all these countless millions of people. Now, during the recreation, the chiefs from many worlds, as well as gods and goddesses, mingled together, and exchanged their varied experience in the wide regions of Jehovah's universe. Of the management of both corporeal and Essen worlds, of the cosmogony of Etherian planets, the surveying of roadways, turning worlds from their orbital course, or changing their axial rotation, the deliverance of millions of souls into the giant fields, the creation of new corporeal worlds and the dissolution of others, and the gathering together of the spirits disinherited, and of their final resurrection. Neither did there seem to be any end to Jehovah's universe, where such wonders go onward forever. When order was restored, God Nef commanded Wak'hah to rise to be anointed, and God said, "In your name, O Jehovah, I anoint this, your son, Wak'hah, God of heaven and earth for the next 400 years. Guide him in wisdom and love, O Father." And God Nef gathered from the abundance of ethic and made a crown and placed it on Wak'hah's head, saying, "Hail God of heaven and earth, Jehovah's son." This, in turn, was shouted by the hosts. Then God took off the triangle, the samgan, the heirloom of the gods of the red star, the earth, and God hung it from Wak'hah's neck, saying, "Take this heirloom, the symbol of 3 entities in one, and wear it for the glory of the Great Spirit, Jehovah." To which Wak'hah, now God, answered, "Your will be done, O Father, Creator and ruler over all." And all on the throne stood aside, and God Wak'hah ascended the throne and sat in the center, at which time the Essenors chanted, and the hymn sounded around the whole earth. Then Af, son of Jehovah, spoke, saying, "In 400 years, O God Wak'hah, I, Af, will come and deliver you and your harvest, and your lords and their harvest, for the glory of Jehovah, the unapproachable Almighty. Amen." And now Af went and sat down at the foot of the throne, at which God Wak'hah came down according to custom, and took his, Af's, hand, saying, "Arise, O God, son of Jehovah, and go your way." And Af rose up, saluting, and he and his attendants departed and entered his starship. The Essenors chanted, the trumpeters played, and the solemn march of Jehovah's sea of fire sounded from heaven and earth. The marshals now put the great works in order. Nef and his attendants were stationed on the right of Af in a ship newly built, next to him, the ships of his lords and their attendants, After them, their marshals from the different divisions of the earth and atmosphere. Next to them, the ships of the messengers, then the factors, then the nurses, then the physicians, and so on. And finally the divisions of earth rays, who were now adjourned to the sun avalanche, those rays from earth being of the same rank as those from Hotchuin. These comprise the harvest of Nef for Jehovah's emancipated realms, and the number of souls exceeded all other harvests raised up from the earth. And now came the time for the ascent, and Af said, "Give us of your power, O Jehovah." And his words were echoed in all places in heaven and on earth. The plateaus trembled and oscillated. Again Af said, "Of your power, O Jehovah. Arise, O heaven. Arise, O heaven." And the plateaus of the sphere collective of starships started from their foundations, and slowly moved back and outward away from the earth. The Essenors played the march. The Etherians tore off strips of fabric, and threw them down to hoard, and then formed flowers and leaves and perfumed them, casting them out to fall in the lower heavens. Outward, outward, moved the Etherian world, then parted the breadth of the earth, and then rose slowly upward. Presently it, the Etherian world, turned on its own axis, up to now, one entire world. But with its rotation, the different stars began to individualize and separate, all except the harvest of Nef, which was the central figure, led onward and upward by Af, son of the Great Spirit. Faster and faster rose the glorious scene, and more awe-inspiring, and sparkling with splendor. Nor could one from Horde scarcely look upon the dazzling light. But higher it rose, and onward, toward its far-off destiny, till it disappeared in the firmament above.